Good evening. My name is Natalie Voland. I am the President and Chief Strategy Officer at Gestion Immobilière Vadis and Vadis Capital. I started my career taking a degree in poli-sci, African studies, went into social work, thought I could work for UNICEF, ended up working for the YMCA, the Montreal General and Trauma Intensive Care, turned to real estate, became a community builder, and an ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance activist. I was called a dreamer. I was called nice. I was called Mother Teresa of real estate. I then later became an innovator and a trailblazer. But who cares what I was called? What do we call the future of our city? What is the role of our city? Since 38% of our carbon footprint is based on cities or the built environment, we need to figure out how do we build sustainable, all the way up to regenerative, inclusive, accessible, affordable, healthy, and nature-based cities. I was lucky enough to be part of Montreal's climate plan by the Mayor Valérie Plante in 2020, figuring out what we were needing to do for 2030 and 2050. As a private developer, the only one in the room, we realized that, oh my goodness, we will never achieve those targets that we're about to write. What can we do and how can we do it? The traditional real estate model has a typical goal, the golden rule of location, location, location. It is considered a long-term asset, but how did it become that now we need short-term returns between 5 and 7 years? The process is completely and utterly broken for private developers. We look at location, we figure out a project, then we go back and forth and try to figure out how we can zone it, design all the architecture around it, spend a whole lot of money, and then only look at what is our return on investment, which is the ROI. The problem is, how did real estate become from a long-term investment to a short-term process? Why does it not work? We are thinking short-term for the cities that we build. Business plans are built in boardrooms. They're built for return, not for humans or nature. The affordable concept that we're trying to talk about in a city right now is really just the ability of someone to pay for our apartments or our condos. How do we do that? We build smaller units. We don't actually take something off of our product. However, we also are worrying now about what is our quality of life in smaller units. We're building with not good building materials that are cheaper and last less time. Life cycle analysis, not happening in the private industry. Construction waste, a whole lot of it. We also have negative equity where people are buying condos thinking that they're going to be creating some sort of value until the condo association calls and says we need a new roof because we didn't build a roof for the long term. We have to rethink the process. We need to start with purpose. What are we building? For whom? Who are we designing it for? And how long are we designing it before we have to rebuild it? What is the role between our private space and our public need for the community that we're in? But how? What are we missing? How can I personally find the answers? The problem is that if we actually design with purpose, we can build flexible, modular, low-carbon cities. Because something that we've always been missing in real estate for a long time is the H. We need to invest in humans in our return on investment. So what has been really exciting is I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do as a social worker and a climate activist, as a private developer. I want to be able to accelerate climate mitigation in the built environment. Along comes Concordia. What I think is really amazing with Concordia is their whole concept of applied research. Academia and business working together side by side. Why? Because we can scale the change. From data collection to modeling to implementation, we can evaluate and improve what we want to do. I'm working on my PhD in my spare time. That's a joke. I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Ursula Eicher, who is the original first person in on the Next Generation Cities Institute. And there I was brought into the fold because I was trying to figure out what are the barriers and opportunities for private developers to build new construction or retrofit existing buildings to mitigate climate neutral. Complicated slide. What is our answer? An accelerator, a really easy one that we can learn from very quickly, called ABC. Also, it works with accélérateur de barre carbone in French, because it works really well. So I called some friends, and I said, how do we turn all these no's into yeses? How can we find a way that we can apply the process of what I'm doing in my real estate projects, but apply them to other developers across Canada or even the US? So we've tried to figure out who are all the different stakeholders, from developer, researcher, government, architects, engineers, energy suppliers, legal authorities, financiers, our bankers, construction teams, and building managers. What was really, really exciting is that we were able to get very high-placed people to come and sit on an accelerator at Concordia University for free, so that we can actually figure out what do we need to do around public space, buildings, energy systems. And then we created a whole performa, or a process, around making sure that we can give people what is better than business as usual. What is our ABC version of what we can actually help other developers for free learn how to do, so that they can integrate it into their buildings, not just my own. We also created something called the next generation version of this, where something that's super important for us is to figure out what is the process. We created a systems map. It's an interlaying loop of trying to figure out what affects what between all the stakeholders, to be able to figure out what makes the most amount of sense. Where do we get the best bang for our buck to get most private developers to be able to change things? Why private developers? Because city building, from the cities, they don't have as many buildings as private developers do. Institutions, universities, those are all super important. However, it's the private developers that have the most amount of property, whether new or old. So, in closing, I would like to say that I am now an applied system thinker. I'm a collaborator. I hold a part of the puzzle piece where we could work together to get there, to build the cities that we want. Thank you.